Prince William and his wife, Princess Catherine, have made a very, very big choice. This choice is all about what will happen to Camilla in the years to come. It is a plan for her future that King Charles never thought he would hear from his own boy. Charles was so surprised that his heart might have skipped a beat. When the king finally understood the words they were saying to him, he did not get mad. He did not start to yell or get a loud voice. He did not stand up and stomp around. Instead, he just sat there in his chair. He was totally silent. The room was very quiet. This was not just a small fight about a title or a name. It was not a hidden family secret behind the big palace doors. This was a very serious moment. It was a moment that would change how everything works in the royal house for a very long time. William and Catherine were drawing a big, clear line around the time when the next king would start to rule the land. They were saying that Camilla would be on the other side of that line. She would not be in the middle of everything anymore. Before the meeting was over, Charles heard one sentence that changed everything. It made the old way of doing things, the way the Queen Mother used to do them, fall apart like a house of cards. Before we talk more about this deep story, please hit the button to subscribe to our channel called The Palace Crowd. It only takes a tiny bit of your time, about 2 seconds. It really helps our channel stay alive, so we can tell you more stories about the royal family and all the things they do behind the scenes. We want to give you all the best information about what happens inside the tall palace walls. The very important meeting took place at an old and famous place called Windsor Castle. It happened on a Thursday evening, on the 13th day of August in the year 2026. The clock on the wall said it was exactly 6:25 in the evening. King Charles had been told that the meeting was going to be about future plans. He thought it would be a boring talk about how things would change when a new person becomes the king later on. He thought they would talk about office workers, calendars, and making sure everything stays the same. He did not think it would be something that would make him feel shocked. Usually, those kinds of meetings are just about paperwork. They are about who does what job and how to keep the royal business running. Nobody expected any big news or any giant changes on that quiet summer night. Then King Charles walked into the private sitting room. He saw William and Catherine waiting for him. They were sitting there looking very serious. Between them on a small table was a folder. The folder was a soft cream color. There were 4 words printed across the front of the folder in big, dark letters. Those 4 words said, "The Next Reign Household." Charles sat down in his chair. He looked at his son, William, and then he looked at Catherine. He wanted to know what was hidden inside the folder. William did not reach out to open the papers. Instead, Catherine was the one who opened the folder. That one small move changed the feeling in the room right away. It showed Charles that this was not just William's idea. It showed that Catherine was a big part of the plan, too. Catherine was not just there to be nice or to help her husband. She was a big part of the decision. She was standing equal with William in this choice. When Charles started to read the very first page, he saw that the future he had planned for Camilla was going to be very different. The words on the paper were not mean or angry. They did not say that Camilla would lose her honor or her pride. They did not say she had to leave the family or go away forever. There was no mean talk about her marriage to the king. Instead, the words were very professional and a little bit cold. They said there should be one leader, one team of workers, and one center of power when the next king starts his job. It was a very simple rule for a very big job. At first, the words just sounded like rules for an office. But then the real meaning became clear, and it was a very big deal. If King Charles died before Camilla, things would not be like they were in the old days. There would be no second royal team built just for his widow. There would be no special palace machines to help her. She would not automatically get her own office to talk to the news. She would not have a permanent team of workers just because they worked for the king before. There was no promise that the place called Clarence House would stay as her own private royal home. Camilla could still be part of the family, and she could keep her official name. But William and Catherine were making one thing very clear. When Charles is no longer king, the monarchy will belong only to the next king and the next queen. This was the news that Charles never saw coming. The idea did not even start with William. 3 days before the meeting, Catherine was at her home in Kensington Palace. She was reading some papers about how things worked in the past when a king or queen died. Most of it was just old stories until she got to the year 1952. That was the year King George VI passed away. His daughter became the famous Queen Elizabeth II, but his wife became the Queen Mother. She moved into Clarence House. She stayed as one of the most important people in the country for many, many years. She had a big team of workers. She did many jobs. She helped many groups and was always seen in public. She was a very big part of the royal family for a very long time. Catherine read that part of the history book 2 times. Then she saw a special phrase that changed everything in her mind. The phrase was Queen Mother President. She looked across the table at her helpers and asked what that would mean for Camilla in the future. The answer she got was very careful. It meant that a widow of a king could keep doing public work. She could keep her own team of workers. She could stay in the middle of all the fancy ceremonies. She would always have a big group of people around her to help her stay important. Catherine listened to this answer very quietly. She was thinking about how that would work today. She was wondering if that old way of doing things was still a good idea for the future of the family. Then Catherine asked a question that nobody seemed to want to answer. She asked if Camilla would have her own team of workers and her own office. The room went silent for a little bit too long. Catherine's worry was not that Camilla would do charity work or go to family parties. The problem was about how the whole royal business is built. A royal household means having people to give advice. It means having people to plan schedules and talk to the news. It means having people to send out invites and take care of big groups. On their own, each little part seems okay. But when you put them all together, they make something much bigger. They make a second center of power. This second center would be right next to the new king. This really bothered Catherine. She felt it was a problem because the old way with the Queen Mother was very different. The Queen Mother was the real mother of the new queen, but Camilla is William's stepmother, and Catherine herself would be the new queen. These are different people with a different history. They have different kinds of stress in their lives. Catherine turned to William and asked a question that made him stop thinking about this as just a simple office rule. She asked him if they were planning for their own time as king and queen, or were they just following old rules made for someone else? She wanted to make sure they were doing what was best for the future, not just what was easy or what had been done before. William did not want to change things at first. He knew what would happen if they changed Camilla's future. He knew people would say he was being mean. He knew people would talk about his mother, Diana, again. People might say that Catherine was trying to push another queen away so she could be the only one. William might be called a person who was trying to get even for things that happened a long time ago. He did not want any part of that kind of talk. He wanted to be fair and kind. Then Catherine said something that he did not expect at all. She said that if the rule looked like it was only for one person, they should make it apply to her too. William just stared at her in surprise. Catherine really meant what she said. She was being very brave. She said that if William died first and their son, George, became the king, she would not expect a second royal court for herself either. She would not want a big Catherine team or a separate office that had a lot of power while George was trying to be the king. She would not want to take away from his power. She would still be his mother, of course. She would still keep her pride and work on the things she cares about. But the crown and all the big royal workers would belong only to George. In that one moment, the whole argument changed. This was not just about Camilla anymore. It was a rule that Catherine was willing to follow herself. 3 days later, King Charles would read this new rule at Windsor Castle. He would finally understand that the future he thought was all set was actually not set at all. William did not answer Catherine right away when she told him her idea at Kensington Palace. The room was very quiet, but the silence was not about Camilla anymore. It was about how selfless Catherine was being. She had just taken away the easiest way for people to get mad. If the same rule was going to be for her one day, then William could not be called mean. He could not say the rule was just a punishment for one woman. It was a rule for everyone. It was about making the royal family stronger for the future. William looked back at the history papers. He saw that the problem was even bigger than he thought. For a long time, the way kings and queens changed had just been a habit. One leader stops and a new one starts. But the people, the offices, and the habits do not just go away in one night. The old important people stay where they are. The workers stay in their jobs. The houses still feel like they belong to the old reign. William knew that having things stay the same could help the family feel steady. But he also understood what Catherine was trying to tell him. If nobody decided where the old way stopped and the new way started, then people might start to feel like they are owed things that they are not. Catherine's idea was very strong because it was very clear. A widow of a king would keep her honor and her family spot. She would keep her private hobbies, but she would not get to keep the big royal power. If the new king wanted her to help, he would be the one to ask her. It would not happen just because it happened in the past. It would not happen because a team of workers had been there for a long time and wanted to keep their jobs. This new way of thinking changed the look on William's face. It gave him a reason that was not about feelings. It was about a big rule. He asked his helpers to test this idea in every way they could to see if it would work. He asked what would happen to the people who talked to the news. He asked what would happen to the big offices. He wanted to know which groups the royals helped because they liked them, and which ones they helped because of the crown. He wondered if a former queen could still show up in public without making people confused about who was really in charge. He wondered if a royal house could still be linked to the old king without secretly becoming a second headquarters. The answers were not easy to find. If they tried to fix this while they were sad about someone dying, they might make mistakes. They might make promises they could not keep because they were feeling too many emotions. If they talked about it now, years before anything happened, they could build rules instead of just thinking about people. But William still saw the risk. He knew his mother's name, Diana, would be brought up no matter what he did. Any choice that made Camilla's future power smaller would be called a son getting revenge for his mother. William knew that story would spread very fast. He also knew people would say Catherine was using her own fame to make Camilla look small before she became the queen herself. Catherine knew this would happen too. That is why she made her own sacrifice so clear. She was willing to give up her own future power to make sure the rules were fair for everyone. She said that if George became king, she would not want the big machine of William's time to stay wrapped around her like a blanket. She would not ask for her own news office just because people liked her. She would not say that the workers had to listen to her just because they had done it for years. She did not want to put George in a spot where he was the king but still had to deal with his mother's old power. Thinking about this was not easy. It made them feel a little bit uncomfortable. But that was exactly why the idea worked so well. It was a very fair way to look at the future of the whole royal family and the crown. William knew how much Catherine loved George. He knew how hard it was to lose a parent when you are young and trying to grow up. He had lived through that himself when he was a boy, and it was a very hard time for him. The idea of Catherine having less power after he was gone did not feel like a simple business plan. It felt very personal and very sad. But Catherine was asking him to keep two things separate. She wanted to keep family love separate from royal power. You can love your family very much without needing to control everything in the government. From that point on, the words in the folder became even stronger. One king, one team, and one leader in the middle of it all. The helpers took out anything that sounded like they were trying to be mean. They did not use Camilla's name in the rule. They did not talk about Diana at all. They did not use words like taking away or removing. They did not say that a widow should be hidden or treated badly. The rule had to be strong enough to change the way things worked. But it also had to be fair so that nobody could say it was just made for one person. Then someone asked the big question that everyone had been thinking about. They asked about Clarence House. When that name was said, the feeling in the room changed again. A house could be a private home, but it could also be a place of big power. A house like Clarence House is where workers meet and where guests are welcomed. It is where charities have meetings and where news reports are sent out. It is a place where a former queen could keep being a big public figure for a long time. Clarence House has a lot of history. William did not say anything for a minute. Catherine watched him closely. The helpers waited to see what he would say. The Queen Mother had lived in that house for a very, very long time. Charles knew that story very well because he loved his grandmother. Camilla already uses Clarence House as a part of her royal life. If they were serious about having only one big household, they had to decide if the rule reached the house, too. This was the moment William knew they could not just talk about this with helpers. Charles had to hear it himself. They did not want him to hear it from a leak or a news story. They wanted to tell him in person. A private meeting was set up at Windsor Castle for a Thursday evening. The note sent to the king was very simple. It just said they would talk about future plans. Charles had no reason to think there would be a fight. William wanted his father to see the big rule before anyone else could try to explain it. By the time the folder was ready, Catherine's question had turned into a big rule that could change every king and queen that comes after them. By 6:31 that evening, King Charles had finished reading the first page of the plan. He looked up very slowly. The room at Windsor Castle did not feel like a normal meeting anymore. William sat across from him with his hands folded neatly. Catherine sat with the folder open. Charles had read enough to know what they were planning, but he was not sure if he could accept it yet. At first, he did not look angry. He just looked like he could not believe what he was reading. He looked at his son and said that this was about Camilla. William answered very carefully. He said that the plan affects Camilla, but it is about more than just her. Charles kept looking at him. He said that it was the same thing. But then Catherine spoke up before William could say anything else. She said, "No, it is not." That answer made Charles feel even more unsure. He turned back to the paper. It said a new reign would start with one king, one main team, and one line of power. A widow could still be a respected family member, but she would not have her own office or house by right. Charles stopped at one line in the folder. Then he asked the question William knew was coming. He asked what would happen to Clarence House. For a moment, nobody said a word. That silence felt like it lasted for 100 years. Clarence House was not just a normal house. It was where the Queen Mother lived for almost 50 years after her husband died. Charles grew up with his grandmother being a very big and powerful part of royal life. She was always there during the time his mother was the queen. To Charles, Clarence House was proof that a widow could stay important without making things hard for the new king or queen. To him, that old way was something he knew and liked. It made him feel better to think that a widow does not just vanish when her time as queen is over. He thought she should stay and keep working with a big team to help her. But William was getting ready to break that old way of thinking. He looked right at his father. He told him that nothing is automatic anymore. Charles did not move. William kept talking. He said the house is not automatic, the office is not automatic, the workers are not automatic, the big royal role is not automatic. Each sentence felt very heavy. This was the part Charles did not expect. He knew William would one day make his own rules. But he did not think there would be a rule saying that the old queen's team would end when the old king's time was over. Charles leaned back. The talk was now very personal and very serious for both of them. Charles asked a very sad question. He asked what would happen if he was not there to protect Camilla. That question changed the whole mood. For a second, he was not the king. He was just a husband who was worried about his wife. William's face looked a bit softer when he heard that, but his answer stayed the same. He said that she would not need protection from them. Charles looked at him and asked what he called this plan then. William waited for a second. There was a big silence in the room. Charles had waited for many years to be the king. And now his son was asking him to think about the day when he would be gone and someone else would be in charge. Charles was being forced to imagine Camilla living in a world where the royal power did not belong to their house anymore. Charles turned his head toward Catherine. Up until then, William had done most of the talking. Charles seemed to think Catherine would just sit there and be quiet, but instead she made an argument that he did not see coming. She told him that the rule applies to her, too. Charles just stared at her. That sentence did not fit with the idea he had in his head. Catherine told him that if William died and George became king, she would follow this same rule. She would not expect a separate court just because she used to be the queen. She said she would not think William's workers should stay with her. She would not demand to have a big voice next to her son's throne. Charles listened and did not stop her. Catherine was putting her own future inside this new rule. That made it very hard for Charles to say no. This was not a rule made just to be mean to Camilla. It was a limit that Catherine was willing to live with, too. Her point was very simple. When George becomes the king, the reign has to be his and his alone. It should not belong to the memory of his father or the old ways of his mother. It should be a fresh start for him. Then Catherine said something that really stopped the room. She said her son should never have to take over her power as well as his father's crown. Charles looked down at the folder again. He did not say anything. He did not get mad. He did not end the meeting. He just sat there. He might have disagreed with William, and he might have been worried about Camilla. He might have wondered if they should really throw away so much history. But Catherine had taken away his best defense. He could not say the rule was only for Camilla if Catherine was going to follow it too. For a long time, the king said nothing at all. William did not try to talk during the silence. He let his father think. The decision had reached a point where Charles could see the future very clearly. He saw one king, one queen, and one team. He saw that Camilla would not be promised her own royal court. But the woman who would be affected the most still had not heard the news. Charles finally looked up and made one small request. He said that Camilla should hear the plan directly from them. By 7:05, she was on her way to the room. At 7:10 that evening, the door opened and Camilla walked in. She knew right away that something big had changed. Charles was not reading anymore. William looked very controlled but also a bit nervous. Catherine stayed right next to the folder with her hand on the page. Nobody was smiling. It was a very serious family meeting. Camilla looked at Charles first, but he did not say anything. That told her everything she needed to know. William stood up and asked her to sit down. He spoke in a very calm and formal way. He was trying to make a hard choice sound simple and clear. Camilla sat in the chair next to Charles. She looked at the folder and asked what had happened. She wanted to know what they were talking about. William did not start by talking about her name or her house. He started by talking about the future. He said that he and Catherine had decided how their royal team would work. When the next time comes for a new king, there will only be one main leader at the center. There will be one main team to help that leader. Other family members can still be active and respected. They can still be seen in public, but there would not be a second royal team that stays around automatically for the old queen. Camilla's face changed when she heard this. She understood what it meant very quickly. She asked if it meant her team. William corrected her very gently. He said it meant the king's team. He was trying to say that this was not a personal attack on her. He was trying to separate the person from the job. Whoever wears the crown is the one who gets to lead the royal team. Camilla looked at Catherine and then back at William. She asked, "And what about me?" It was a very short and sad question. Catherine was the first one to answer. She told Camilla that she would always be family. Camilla looked at her and asked if she would still be royal. Catherine did not move. She told her that is not what the plan was saying. William spoke up before things got too tense. He said that Camilla's official status would not go away just because a new king was in charge. She could still help with the charities she likes. She could still come to all the family parties. She could still go to big public events if the king invited her. Respect does not end just because the reign ends, but the big machines of the office would stop. That was the clear line. Camilla listened without saying a word as William explained the details. Workers would answer to the new king. News would come from the new king's office. Being at big events would depend on the king's invite. Even the houses where royal work happens would be looked at again. Nothing was being taken away right that second, but nothing was being promised for the future either. That not knowing was the hardest part for Camilla. She turned to Charles and asked if she would just disappear once he was gone. Charles looked at William, but William was the one who spoke first. He said, "No." He explained that disappearing and losing official power are two very different things. A former queen can still be a part of the country without having a whole royal team of her own. She can be there without being a second leader. Then he said a sentence that made the whole plan very clear. He said that family is not the same as the government. Camilla went very still. For a long time, her whole life has been built around working next to Charles. She goes to meetings, helps groups, and goes to big ceremonies. She has a team that helps her every day. This new plan did not erase all those years of hard work, but it said that the team helping her would not stay there automatically once Charles was no longer the king. This was a very quiet loss, but it was also a very big one. It was something that was hard to argue against. Camilla looked at Catherine again. They were still a little bit tense with each other, but something in Catherine's eyes made Camilla stop for a second. Catherine did not look like she was happy about this. She did not look like she had won a prize. Catherine understood exactly how much this would cost because she had already said she would follow the same rule. She told Camilla again that if George became king, she would not ask him to keep a separate Catherine team around her. She would not want a second office or workers who had to listen to her. She would not want to be a loud voice next to her son. Camilla's face changed again. This time she did not look as angry. She saw that Catherine was not asking her to do something that Catherine was not willing to do herself. That was very important. The room became very quiet. Charles watched his wife. William watched his father. Catherine kept her eyes on Camilla. She let the news sink in without trying to make it sound better than it was. For the first time since she walked in, Camilla stopped asking what she would lose. She started asking what the rule really was. She wanted to know if it was just for widows or for everyone in the future. She asked if a future king could just change the rule back. William looked at Catherine and then at the folder. These were the questions they thought she would ask. They had the answers ready. Camilla thought she had heard everything, but she had not. William turned the first page over. He showed a second sheet of paper underneath. At the top was a new name. It said, "The One Court Principal." Under that name was a list of people and future things that would happen. It made one thing very clear. This rule was much bigger than just Camilla. It was a rule for the whole future of the monarchy. The second page changed how everyone felt. Camilla thought her name would be the most important part, but the words were about everyone. The rule would apply to every widow who came after a king. Catherine's name was on the list. The person George marries one day was also on the list. Even Charlotte was on there in case she ever became the queen. This was not a secret plan for just one hard time. It was a new rule for how the crown passes from one person to another. It meant that when one king's time is over, his royal team is over, too. It is a very big change. The next king could still ask a former queen to help out. She could still go to big shows or help with special groups, but none of that would happen just because it happened before. The new king would have to say it was okay. Camilla read the page very slowly. She saw that she could not say they were picking on her anymore. Catherine had already said yes to it. Every future queen would have to face it, too. The plan was made to last a very long time, even after everyone in that room was gone. Charles understood this, too. It was not just about his wife anymore. The real question was if any former queen should have her own power when a new king is trying to rule. William had already talked to someone else about this. A few days before the meeting, he went to talk to Princess Anne in private. Anne has lived her whole life in the royal family. She has seen many kings and queens. She remembers the Queen Mother as a real person, not just a story. She remembered how busy Clarence's house used to be. William wanted to know if ending that old way would make the family feel less steady. Anne's answer was very short. She said it was a different time and a different family. William asked her one more time if she liked the idea. Anne did not make it about Camilla. That is why her answer was so important. She only thought about the crown. She said the next king has to be allowed to be the king. That was all. This showed that you can still love a former queen without having her be a second boss. You can still be nice and respectful to her. You can still listen to her. But she does not have to have the same power she used to have. Anne looked at it like a business rule. That gave William the help he needed to move forward with the plan. Back at Windsor, William said that the rule was not meant to erase what happened in the past. It was meant to stop the past from telling the future what to do. The way the Queen Mother did things worked for her, but that does not mean everyone has to do it that way forever. Charles looked at the names on the second page one more time. For the first time that night, he was not just reading as Camilla's husband. He was reading as the king. He was looking at a rule that would change things for George and for children who are not even born yet. The talk was about much more than just one house now. It was about whether the royal family should keep old powers going forever or if they should start fresh with each new king. Inside the room, Camilla had one more question. She asked if a future king could just throw the rule away. William's answer was very smart. He said that a king can always choose how to run his own team. That was the whole point of the plan. The paper was not made to tell George what to do from far away. It was made to say that no old team has a right to be in charge of a new king. That made the rule even stronger. Camilla would be important because a new king chose to make her important, not because an old rule forced him to do it. Charles closed the folder for a few seconds. Nobody said a word. Then the meeting started to end. Camilla stood up first. Catherine stood up after her. There were no big goodbyes. They were just four people who knew that something very big had just been put on paper. William thought his father would let them leave, but Charles did not. As Catherine went to the door, Charles asked William to stay behind for a minute. Camilla and Catherine walked out together. The door closed and the father and son were finally alone. Charles did not want to talk about Camilla anymore. His next question was all about Catherine. He asked William if he had really thought about what this rule would mean for her one day. William answered right away. He said he thinks about it every single day. The feeling in the room changed again. Charles had spent the night worried about his wife. Now he was making William think about what it would be like if he was gone. He made him imagine Catherine being all alone. He made him think about a time when George might become the king too early. He asked if William could really accept that Catherine would have to step away from all her power without feeling bad. He asked if he could imagine her without a big team around her after everything she has done for the country. William looked at the door where Catherine had just gone. Then he said something that Charles did not expect. He said that he might not be able to imagine it, but Catherine can. That was the part Charles could not argue with. Catherine did not support the rule because it was easy. She did it because she believed the next king needs to be free to make his own choices. If that king is George, then even his mother should not be a second boss just because people love her so much. Charles sat and thought about that. The talk started with Camilla, but it ended with Catherine. That is why the choice was going to stay. The next morning, on Friday, the 14th of August, William and Catherine looked at the words one last time. They made sure the words were not mean. There was no mention of Diana or any mean things about Charles. It was just one rule. It said the next reign will have one king, one court, and one team. William signed his name first, then Catherine signed hers. 2 names and one big choice. They did not celebrate. They knew that this paper meant they might both lose things one day. They knew it was a rule for them, too. This was a big deal for the whole British monarchy. For a long time, everyone remembered the Queen Mother as the model for what a widow should be. People thought Clarence's house and the old way would last forever. But William and Catherine were choosing a new path. Camilla could stay in the family and keep doing her hobbies. She could show up when the king asked her to, but she would not have her own big team anymore. Catherine had put herself in that same future. That was the most important part of all. If William died first, she would not get a special pass. She would not get her own team just because she was popular. The rule would still be there for her, too. Charles left the meeting knowing that the monarchy would change after him. He had seen the future. He was quiet because he had to imagine a time when his own power was gone. He saw that William's power would start. He saw that Camilla's future would be in William's hands, not his. And there is still one big question left to answer. That question is about Clarence House. It is the house Charles asked about first. It is the house William never fully talked about. If there is only one royal team who gets to control that big, famous house, that one answer will show if this new rule is just words on a page or if it is a real change for the royal family. It will show if the old way of the Queen Mother is truly over. The future of the palace depends on what happens next with that house. Everyone is waiting to see how the new king and queen will handle it when the time finally comes.